When I was making my year-end video for the best hit country songs of 2021, I reminded myself of an old video I had made while talking about Brice and Memory I Don't Mess With. Here is that little clip. I did one of those videos of country stars that somehow aren't super famous but have a lot of hits, and I talked about people like Josh Turner that just every couple years he has a hit, but he's not necessarily winning all these big awards. He's not on the cover of People magazine like Blake Shelton. I feel like Brice is the ultimate example of that. Everything from I Drive Your Truck to Rumor to now Memory I Don't Mess With, he's just racking up hits quietly, but I really don't think like we're paying that much attention. Maybe I'm becoming a Brice stan and I didn't even know it. And so today I want to revisit this concept of country stars that aren't necessarily playing the fame game, that aren't necessarily the most recognizable celebrities, but nonetheless have amassed giant careers, just because I think those people that are flying just under the radar are so interesting. And so I pulled a bunch of comments that were underneath the last videos, the ones that weren't simping for Sarah Evans, because wow, to this day, she still has a lot of dudes wrapped around her finger. And also, just like last time, I did some polls on my Instagram to judge very crudely the recognizability of some of the people I'm gonna mention in this video. And the way I prompted that was by asking, would your friends be able to tell you who this person is? I'm confident that most of us here could name most of these people because, hey, we are the diehard country fans. We live and breathe this stuff, but to the general public, are these people known? And in case you need a reminder, my control groups for that were Carrie Underwood and Blake Shelton, just two people that I think of as very famous and glamorous and on TV all the time. And yeah, sure enough, it was up in the 90s for both of them. And none of this is meant to be shady. If anything, I really admire that these people are kind of more low-key celebrities while still having big careers. And so just starting off with my own example that I already kind of referenced, Brice. Obviously, we've been kind of waking up to how big of a hitmaker Brice is lately. It almost reminds me of how Breaking Bad got popular in like the last 30% of its run. Not that Lee is in the last 30% of his career, but he's racked up like 8 #1 singles. He's been nominated for 15 awards over the course of his career. And now he's sitting pretty with over 6 million monthly listeners on Spotify. And yet when I asked on Instagram, would your friends be able to tell you who this is? 53% of voters said no. But still, 47% said yes. And so maybe he's not as like kind of off the radar as I was thinking. And that's from like 5,000 votes, by the way. Damn. And granted, I went with the little like fedora-ish pick because I feel like that is what he's normally presenting as. Probably the most mentioned person in the comments of the last video was Gary Allan. I'm just sitting out here watching airplanes. Catherine agreed, Dan agreed, a bunch of people agreed, and I agree. Gary Allan is someone that I think won the Horizon Award back in 2003. So he's been around for like 20 years at this point. But his hits have been kind of sporadic. I mean, we got classics like Chasing Airplanes and songs about rain. Rainy night in Georgia and Kentucky rain. And Tough Little Boys. Oh, and tough little boys grow up to be dads. And Best I Ever Had, which is, it's funny, it's one of those songs that I first heard as a cover, so I didn't even know about the Vertical Horizon version. I just thought Gary Allan's was the original version. And after a while where he'd kind of fallen off and his songs weren't hitting as much, he had a major career resurgence with one of his kind of career songs, which is Every Storm Runs Out of Rain, which was written after the tragedy of losing his wife. In more recent years, Gary's kind of back to struggling to play on the radio, and he's become more and more outspoken about that. But he's still putting out new music all the time. He's released 10 studio albums, including that one Ruthless last year. And I just know from comments and DMs that there is a real core fan base that forever want justice for Gary Allan and that raspy voice of his. When I asked on Instagram if your friends would be able to tell you who this is, 75% of voters said no, but 25% said yes. Another really popularly mentioned one was Terri Clark. Easy on the eyes, hard on the heart. I talked about Terri at the very beginning of the Canada video because she was really the first person that made me realize there was a Canadian scene in country music. And she might be famous up in Canada, but here in the States, she was just like regular famous. Still, I feel like she is really beloved for her well-humored, confident, kind of like funny country with a touch of rock songs. Stuff like Girls Lie Too. Girls Lie Too. Oh, gray sweatpants turn. Or You're Easy on the Eyes, or I Just Wanna Be Mad for a While. I just wanna be mad for a while. She's had 3 albums go platinum, and yet, despite all her success and her Juno Awards and a couple CMAs, when I asked on Instagram if people would recognize who this is, 83% of voters said no. And I think part of that is that I have like a lot younger of a fan base. You know, I'm probably about 10 years older than most of my fans. And so a lot of them might have been, you know, too young. Terri Clark might have been famous right around the time that they were born. So if you're one of those people, I would say you've actually maybe heard Terri Clark more than you realized, because she was on that incredible Hot Country Night song. You make it hard. So she's maintaining the good humor further on in her career, and I think it is that kind of natural sensibility about her that has also made her a really successful radio DJ. Someone I would add into this mix is Cole Swindell. I gotta give Cole Swindell credit for running with the ball. There is no one that has kind of made more out of being Luke Bryan's former merch guy into becoming a guy with multiple #1 radio singles than Cole Swindell. And even if I find most of his music the kind of paint by numbers, boring radio country that I can't stand, I mean, there are a few songs that I go harder on than like Chillin' It. That weird song, Hope You Get Lonely Tonight, which I find a strange concept. Hope you get lonely tonight. Some song where he calls his girl a little beer holder. I mean, I'm tough on Cole Swindell, and yet he really has kind of proved me wrong. I thought this is someone that would be famous for like 2 seconds. And the guy has hustle. I mean, everything from You Should Be Here, which was more substantive, I gotta give him credit. Even this new one, Never Say Never with Lainey Wilson, Single Saturday Night. I mean, he just kind of quietly racks up hits. But I never hear like this passion for him. I never hear people reach out and be like, you gotta cover the new Cole Swindell. And I just find that interesting. He's like, you know, if we were talking about Breaking Bad earlier, I feel like he's like NCIS. You blink and you realize NCIS is on its 18th season or something, and you wonder, how did I not even realize it was on TV? Now, when I asked on Instagram, Cole did a little bit better than most of the other artists, but at the same time, he's still got 59% of people said their friends wouldn't be able to say who he is. Also, shouts to the fact that he is always wearing my initials on his head. It's actually for Georgia Southern, but whenever I see it, that's what I think of. Jake Owen is another guy that got a ton of comments on that first video. And this one was curious to me because Jake, I think, has actually had a pretty strong career. And until he got like his hair cut and cut off the big flow, I feel like he had a sort of very recognizable image as like the surfer bro of country. Still, something I've talked about on the channel before is that his last album, Greetings from Jake, had confusingly little attention given how many hits it spawned. Everything from I Was Jack, You Were Diane, to Down to the Honky Tonk, to Made for You and Homemade. I mean, there's a lot of hits on that album, and yet I never hear people talk about that album. Certainly not the way I heard people talk about stuff like Barefoot Blue Jean Night when he was like the cool newish guy on the scene. There has been some kind of boom and bust cycles in Jake Owen's career. After the success of Beachin', he kind of was off track a little bit in the real life era. And then he had another hit with American Country Love Song, but then kind of 2016, 2017, he kind of struggled to achieve it. Until I Was Jack and You Were Diane, which was sort of the song that led to this current Jake Owen career moment. And you might think that that's not that weird, but a lot of times artists like Luke Combs will take off and then just everything they drop. Same with Luke Bryan. It's just like number one, number one, number one, number one, number one. Not everyone demonstrates that kind of inconsistency. When I asked if your friends would be able to tell you who this is on Instagram, 56% of people said yes. So he's one of the rare, more recognizable people in this poll. The guy's got over 4 million monthly listeners on Spotify, and in the scheme of things, he's kind of killing the game. After that, we had Randy Houser. Put your hair down, get you some of this laid on back. Now, Randy Houser, it's funny that I'm putting him in this video because I used to always actually mix him up with Brice. I just like, there's certain names that for whatever reason you can never get right. And it's the same thing that always happens to me with Carey Mulligan and Michelle Williams. Like, I've always mixed them up. And I feel like that's just because they look similar. But I know a lot of people mix up like all the various Lukes that are in country music. Some people mix up Tennille Arts and Tennille Towns. I remember when Kelsey Ballerini debuted, there was another girl named, I think, Veronica Ballestrini. But that's all besides the point. We're talking about Randy Houser, and Randy Houser has had a career that, again, has had some sporadic hits. His first big hit was a song called Boots On in 2009. But then he was kind of off the charts for a few years until this big span from like 2012 through 2014 where he had hits like Goodnight Kiss and Running Out of Moonlight and We Went. Despite the intensely bro-ish nature of most of his output in that that time. Randy Houser kind of had this change of heart, and a lot of his album Magnolia from early 2019 was about him deciding to kind of go for more substantive music. And in a Shakespearean tragedy for the ages, the buying public didn't really care. I mean, you guys know Magnolia is an amazing album. No Stone Unturned, Evangeline, No Good Place to Cry, like What Whiskey Does. All these freaking songs are amazing. And yet Randy and his newish look of the bandana around the neck just aren't getting the attention that they have deserved as of late. I asked on Instagram, and 84% of respondents said their friends would not be able to tell them who this is. So, pretty low score. But go listen to Magnolia. Another really commonly mentioned person was Dee Messina. Randy said, as far as low-key famous, I feel like Dee Messina could be added to the list. She hasn't had any hits in recent years, but she did have quite a big career in the 90s to early 2000s, but was never huge. And yeah, that's totally true. I mean, at the turn of the millennium, right when I was first starting to listen to music for myself, Dee Messina was all that. She won the Top New Female Vocalist Award from the ACMs in 98. She then won the Horizon Award a year later in 99. She had just huge songs like Heads Carolina, Tails California, I'm Alright, which has one of my favorite little breakdowns ever. And then she had stuff like Bye Bye. And then a video that's just emblazoned on my mind, because I feel like you always remember the first few videos you see. And man, late 90s, just cheesy music videography is so memorable. But for the song Bring On the Rain with Tim McGraw, Dee Messina burned bright for a few years, but as far as chart relevance, she definitely kind of fell off. But when I did the poll, 85% of people said they wouldn't recognize her. And then the other person that got mentioned in a ton of comments is Kip Moore. Now look, Kip's been on the channel, y'all know I know Kip, but you know, if there were someone I know that's not interested in playing the fame game, it's kind of him. And what I think is actually super cool about his career and why a lot of his fans love him is even after that giant debut era where he had Something About a Truck and Hey Pretty Girl and Beer Money, he has very much found a way to do things his own way within the context of the industry. And every couple years he has some big kind of return up the chart, whether it's with Last Shot or with She's Mine, and hopefully with this next one of Crazy One More Time Revisited. That's like a huge part of his charm. And otherwise he's just like doing what? He's surfing, he's climbing, he's playing live shows. You know, he's got a very, very loyal fan base and is known for a great live show. And as far as recognizability, I said, would your friends be able to tell you who this is? 70% said no, but 30% said yes. And in this weird little poll, pretty darn good. But anyway, that's all I wanted to talk about in today's video. I just wanted to revisit that kind of subject because I think it's fun and it's interesting, and we all want like justice for the underrated artists in our lives. And you know, like I said, none of this is meant to be shady. I'm trying to celebrate these people, and they still have huge careers that any of us would kill for. But that's it. Let me know your thoughts, and I'll be back with a bunch more country content coming up soon. Content creator. Let's just say videos. It's less cringe. Bye.